So the first section of the syllabus that we will be covering, and as was communicated to you in the orientation session, is strategy. Strategy is basically one of the fundamental themes examinable in this syllabus of strategic business leader, and you're likely to see some questions on strategy on a regular basis in your paper. So you need to be fully informed and fully aware of the strategy related themes. And in strategy, basically, we first need to understand some of the basic concepts, because those basic concepts are the fundamentals. So every entity that you would see in the world, be it an individual, be it an organization, be it a state, it has some objective, right? For example, you're sitting in this class, you have an objective. You're also an entity, an individual. You have an objective to pass the strategic business leader exam. Likewise, governments have their own objectives. Likewise, companies also have their objectives. For example, some companies want to maximize their profits. Some companies want to increase their market share. Some companies want to improve the quality of their products. Some companies want to ensure maximum customer satisfaction. So there are different objectives that companies are pursuing. Now, in order to achieve those objectives, what needs to be in place? There has to be some strategy. There has to be some course of action, including specification of resources in order to achieve a predetermined outcome. So strategy is what? Strategy is a course of action, including the specification of resources in order to achieve a predetermined outcome, a predetermined objective. So whatever predetermined outcome means, predetermined outcome is linked to objective, right? So whatever your objective is, in order to attain that objective, in order to accomplish that objective, you would appreciate that you need to have an action plan. You need to have a course of action. You need to follow a particular path. And in following that path, you also need certain resources. You also need certain resources in order to achieve your objectives. In order to realize your objectives, you need to have certain resources as well. For example, you need to have certain financial resources, certain human resources, etc. So for example, if I take your example, your objective is to pass the SBL exam. Now, what is your strategy? Your strategy is, your course of action is, you've joined my classes. Your strategy is that you've joined classes on a timely basis. Your strategy is that you will be using certain resources. For example, you would be using my notes. You would be attending my lectures. You would be reading the technical articles, examiners' reports, past papers. So all of these are resources that you would be using so that you are equipped with the ability required to pass the strategic business leader exam. Likewise, if a company has the objective of, say, increasing its market share, so it would have to have a course of action. For example, it would have to come up with maybe new product development. It would have to go for new product development to come up with a product that is new, that is more distinctive, that has got some unique selling points, so that it can attract more customers towards its business, and so that it is able to maximize its market share, to maximize its revenues. So I hope you're clear on this particular aspect, that what is an objective and what is a strategy. Now, the next thing which you need to keep in mind is that companies prepare strategies via the strategic management process, or this is also known as the strategic planning process. Strategic management process or the strategic planning process. Now, what is the strategic management process or the strategic planning process? Simply speaking, it is an approach, it is a method or a process through which entities produce their strategy, through which they develop their strategy. And this strategic planning process has three main areas. The strategic planning process has got three main areas. It has got strategic analysis, strategic choice, and strategic implementations. There are three main areas within the strategic planning process or the strategic management process. And what are they? They are strategic analysis, strategic choice, strategic implementation. Strategic analysis is also termed as strategic position, for example. But what is the core theme? The core theme of strategic analysis is the assessment of current position of the entity. What is strategic analysis all about? It is about the assessment of entities' current position. When we say entity's current position, what does that mean? Current position of an entity is shaped by both its internal situation as well as its external situation, right? So there are both elements of it. So as far as the analysis or assessment of entities' current position is concerned, when we talk about assessing entities' current position, a popular framework that entities use is SWOT, S-W-O-T, SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is basically a tool that is used to assess the entity's current strategic position. Now, what is SWOT analysis all about? You must have heard of this framework in your earlier studies as well when you covered F1 Accountant in Business. So we're revisiting it over here in Strategic Business Leader course. SWOT analysis has two portions, SW and OT. You can see this demarcation line, this boundary line. SW means strengths and weaknesses. OT means opportunities and threats. Precisely. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Now SW deals with internal factors, company specific factors. When we say internal factors, what we're saying is we're talking about company specific factors. These are the company specific factors that are largely within the control of the company. But when we talk about OT, opportunities and threats for a company come from the external environment. So these internal factors and external factors, the analysis of these internal and external factors, which either tells you about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of an organization, helps you to understand and assess the entity's existing position, current position. So when we will be studying about the strengths and weaknesses, when you want to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of a company, you look into its capabilities, you look into its value chain, you look into its market segmentation. When it comes to analysis of opportunities and threats, we will be talking about Pastel, we will be talking about Porter's 5 forces, we will be talking about Porter's diamond. So these frameworks are useful for the external analysis, and these frameworks or concepts are useful for the internal analysis. So we would start off with capabilities. When it comes to capability, What is capability? Capability is an organization's ability to produce goods or provide services. Obviously, all those organizations that exist, that remain in business, it is due to their ability to produce goods, to provide services to customers that meet or satisfy the customer needs. Now, capability, I would explain this concept using an equation. It becomes simple to understand. What is capability? Capability is equal to resource plus competence, right? Capability is equal to resource plus competence. So I would give you a simple example. When we say someone is capable of passing SBL, what does he need? What does he or she needs? That person needs to have the resources, for example, the study text, revision kits, past attempts, examiner's reports, lecture notes. These are the resources. But even with all these resources, you would see that some students are able to pass an exam, and other students, while they also have these resources available at their disposal, yet they fail the exam. So why does this happen? This happens because while all the students have the resources required to pass the exam, not all the students have the competence required to pass the exam. Now, what is competence and what is resources? So as far as resources are concerned, let's first understand the resources. Now, M's model is basically used to summarize resources. 6 M's is a simple mnemonic used to save time when thinking about various resources. So what are resources? Money, machinery, manpower, markets, materials, makeup. These are the resources that an organization requires. Organization needs money, obviously. Organization needs finances. Financial capability or financial resources are required in order to excel. Particularly in manufacturing concerns, even in service organizations, certain types of plant and machinery and equipment is required to provide, to produce goods or to render services. Then organizations need to have the right quantity and right quality of manpower, right quality and right quantity of human resources. Then the markets that the organizations are operating in, the customers that they're serving, they're also a resource. Then materials, organizations, particularly even in manufacturing concerns, materials are quite obvious, but even service industries, they do need some sorts of materials in order to render the service. And the makeup, by makeup he means the how the organization is structured, whether it's a flat structure or a large narrow structure, how the what sort of an organizational structure the entity is following. So basically these are the resources that you need to know or that you need to talk about. So like you have this money, machinery, manpower, markets, materials, makeup. So this is basically your set of resources that you need for a business. Now, capability is equal to resource plus competence. But even if two people have, this is a very good example. You could, for example, give two people identical factories and one person could succeed in making popular and well-designed products, while the other might manufacture nothing of any good whatsoever. The first shows competence, the second does not. I mean, both persons had the same resource, that is identical factory, yet one of them was tall structure, small structure, narrow structure. Okay. So Now we need to understand there are certain businesses that are more successful than other businesses. We say that this business has a competitive advantage. For example, Apple has got a competitive advantage over a lot of other businesses. So it, while most businesses have similar resources, where one business gains an edge over the other is the way they are utilizing the resources that they have. That is how competently are they utilizing their resources. So when we say capability is equal to resource plus competence, remember there are two types of resources. One is threshold resources and the other is unique resources. Threshold resources means the bare minimum resources. Threshold resources are the bare minimum resources that you need in order to survive. While unique resources are distinctive resources. I mean, those resources are relatively rare. Those resources are relatively rare and less common. For example, GlaxoSmith having a patent, a valuable patent belonging to GlaxoSmith, that's a unique resource. Why? Because those rights are only conferred on GlaxoSmith and no other pharmaceutical company has those rights. So that's the rare resource. Likewise, there are threshold competencies and there are core competencies. Threshold competencies are the basic competencies, the minimum competencies that you need for the organization to be able to compete. To be precise, threshold competencies are the bare minimum basic competencies that you need in order to survive. If an organization lacks in threshold competencies, then organization will not even be able to survive. While core competencies are those distinctive competencies, those clever way of utilizing your resources or utilizing your resources in such a manner, that your customers are satisfied in a better way, or you achieve a competitive advantage, a competitive edge over your customers. They are core competencies are what? They are distinctive competencies. They are the special ways in which a successful organization can marshal its resources to perform better than its competitors. So basically, you're able to, for example, like I gave you the example of Apple. Apple is a uniquely successful company. Now, it's basically because of their innovative products, because of their successful design techniques, that they are able to achieve better customer satisfaction. So the point is, when it comes to capability is equal to resource plus competence. Now, for survival, those organizations that just want to survive in an industry, what they need to have is threshold capability. That is the bare minimum resources and the bare minimum competences. But if an organization wants to achieve competitive advantage, like Apple has a competitive advantage over its competitors. So what Apple has is strategic capabilities, unique resources, and core competence. Unique resources and core competencies. So in analyzing your current position, when we talk about the analysis of the current position, and to see what are the strengths and weaknesses of an organization, we first need to understand the capabilities of that organization. We need to understand what the capabilities of that organization is. Does it have threshold capabilities or strategic capabilities? And if it has threshold capabilities and wants to achieve a competitive advantage, then obviously the organization would have to go for acquisition of unique resources and would have to develop core competences, sophisticated ways, unique ways and clever ways of utilizing its resources in an optimal manner so that it can ensure maximum customer satisfaction and so that it can attract more customers. We will be talking about value chain market segmentation in our subsequent lectures, but in today's lecture, after understanding capabilities, we will now be focusing on the external environment by understanding Pastel and Porter's 5 forces framework. So, what are the key threats from the external environment? To be honest, this is not exactly correct, because not just threats, external environment can give you opportunities as well. So external environment gives you both threats and opportunities. So you need to understand this particular fact. Now, to assess the external environment, when you're assessing the external environment, two popular frameworks that are used are Porter's 5 forces framework and Pastel analysis. We will first be studying Pastel analysis, and then we'll move towards Porter's 5 forces. So for Pastel analysis, let me tell you, Pastel analysis is basically a tool which is used to analyze the macro environment. It is used to perform a macro environment analysis. Right? Pastel is used for the analysis of macro environment. Now, it is important to understand in the first place why you're studying Pastel. Why isn't it just enough that if a business has a lot of strengths and a business is successfully overcoming its weaknesses, then that should be all about its position? Why is it that we're so much worried about the external environment? The reason for that is a business entity is not operating in isolation. Business entity is not operating in isolation. What do we mean by that? Now, businesses are not operating in isolation. It basically means whatever is happening in the external environment, it does create an impact on the business. It may favorably or unfavorably impact the business. So, businesses are not operating in isolation. That is, whatever is happening in the external environment, it positively or negatively impacts a business. So it gives business either an opportunity or a threat. So businesses have to take care of whatever is happening in the external environment. I think the reason why Nokia is underperforming today, despite having been a market leader for more than a decade or so, is because they fail to understand what's happening in the external environment. Those colleges, those ACCA colleges that would want to stick to the classroom-based platforms, physical classroom-based platforms, I think they'll ultimately go out of business, because the current situation that has been created by COVID-19 requires some different online solutions like the one that we're following. So the point that I'm trying to create is whatever is happening in the external environment either gives you an opportunity or a threat. So what is Pastel all about? Let's understand this concept of Pastel. It's a very interesting framework. Political factors, economic factors, social, technological, environmental, also known as ecological, and legal factors. Now, from an examination perspective, first understand this principle. All of these factors will not necessarily apply. So you don't have to, if you analyzing the macro environment, it doesn't mean you have to find all of these 6 factors and only then your answer will be complete. No, there's just a checklist. There's just a checklist guide that is there give you ideas, to generate ideas. So what is political environment? The attitude of the political party. What sort of an attitude does the political party have? What are their spending priorities? So that is going to determine, that is going to drive demand. For example, if a government wants to support a particular industry and they're giving, for example, tax holidays, that's a great opportunity for those companies that are operating in that particular industry. So political factors and the views of the political parties, that particularly those parties that are in power, they greatly provide you with avenues of opportunity or sometimes threats if their policies are not favorable for your business. If a political party comes in and imposes a lot of taxes on your business, I'm afraid that businesses would suffer. The businesses would not be happy. Their cash flows would be negatively impacted. Their profitability would be severely dented. So these are the troubles that the political environment is creating. I mean, the business hasn't done anything wrong. It's just that the political climate is not in favor of the entity. Similarly, the economic environment, the economic factors, the state of the economy, not just the state of the economy in which the company is operating, but maybe even if you're going for an international market, then maybe the international economy is also going to be a relevant factor, because that is a measure, or that determines a demand for goods and services. For example, if recessionary trends are prevailing in the economy, for example, in contemporary times of COVID-19 pandemic, how many of you are concerned with buying luxury goods, the cars, the luxury mobile phones, and the luxuries associated with, for example, certain expensive clothing, expensive fragrances? How many of you are concerned with that? I'm afraid we're not. We're just concerned with our survival in these unprecedented testing times. The economy has moved, or has at least started to move, into a recession. You can see recessionary trends and recessionary climate prevailing in the economy. So do you think luxury goods manufacturers are going to do well? We've already seen them putting so many substantial discounts. I mean, we never saw them putting this much discounts that they're offering these days. Why are they doing it? Because the recessionary trends prevailing in the economy have dented their business. They haven't done anything wrong. They're still producing optimal quality goods. They're still producing nice quality of goods. It's just that they're no longer satisfying the customer needs in an optimal manner. Customers are just not happy, because they're still satisfying the customer needs. It's just that the customers do not have the purchasing power. They do not have ample money available at their disposal to afford those luxuries. So whatever has happened in the economy has dented the luxury goods manufacturers significantly, substantially. In certain countries, car sales have reduced to nil. So that means the dent in the economy has dented the businesses. Likewise, for example, if we talk about interest rates have recently gone down, which is being viewed as an opportunity by many businesses because their cost of capital has reduced. Government has offered certain subsidies in certain areas for those for companies producing necessities. I mean, that's an opportunity. So you see how the external environment impacts the economic factors, they're impacting the business. Likewise, a few other examples like exchange rates. Exchange rates, if they're not favorable, they will also, if your business is substantially dependent on imports, then, and your currency is depreciating against the foreign currency, then the cost of doing business would increase. Now, that's something that's happening in the external environment, that's reducing your profitability, that's adversely impacting your cash flows. Then comes in the social factors. Social factors means the changes in the nature, habits, attitudes of society, changing values and lifestyle, changing values and beliefs, changing patterns of work and leisure, demographic changes, changing mix in the ethnic and religious background. All of these actually impact. For example, changing lifestyle. Work from home is the new normal. That means rentals of commercial properties should start to go down, maybe in the long run, in the short to medium term at least. Demographic changes. If there's a lot of population which is old age, then maybe you would prefer certain types of construction, certain types of flats for old age as compared to the needs of youth. So social environment definitely impacts the businesses. Technological influences. I think we're living in an age of technology. We're living in an age where technological developments are happening at a very accelerated pace. Technological diffusion is happening at a pace that's difficult to actually keep up with. So whatever technological factors or technological happenings are there in the external environment, they definitely mean that they definitely create an impact for business. For example, I've always been engaged in teaching on physical classroom platform, but for the last few months I've moved on to this online platform. That's has been driven by the change in technology. Then the type of products, services that are made and sold, online lectures, online downloading of books, how the way services are being provided, that has changed. The markets have changed. I mean, now I can access the global market. Previously I was accessing the local market only. So it's the technological influences, the technological factors that have impacted businesses. This Zoom technology that has greatly impacted businesses. Then when it comes to environmental factors, as I told you earlier as well, some authors also write it as ecological factors. There has been a rise of green consumers. You must have heard of this. There's a lot of focus on climate change, on pollution, on the ecological balance of the environment. There's a growing focus that environmental footprint of companies should reduce, water usage, carbon footprint, water footprint, all of these should reduce. So these issues are a cause of concern because now there's a greater appreciation of these issues, and so customers, employees, they don't want to engage with such businesses which are operating in a manner that is not sustainable from an environmental perspective, that are polluting the environment, for example. And so businesses are actually investing money in environmental friendly technologies in order to make sure that they're compliant with the environmental legislation, and also because they want to avoid the backlash that could be created as a result of adverse environmental repercussions that flow from their businesses. Last but not least, legal environment, the legal factors, the laws of the country in which you're operating. Now, if a minimum wage legislation comes in and you were paying your staff too low, so that's going to increase your cost of doing business, for example. If there's a legislation on competitive behavior, if there's a legislation, for example, on advertisements, you will have to be cautious that your advertisements are compliant with the law of the land. So you need to, be very careful about these external factors, these political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal factors. And you need to know, you need to understand, you need to appreciate the implications of these factors for a business. These factors could be an opportunity, these factors could be a threat for the business. So you need to be able to understand these particular factors. Okay. Let's develop a bit of an exam focus now. As far as the exam focus is concerned, Please note that we've already discussed this point, but I'm just writing it for the sake of completeness over here. Not all factors will be present in a scenario. I mean, do not think that you will have all the political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legal factors. So you don't have to worry about that. The second important point that we need to bear in mind is that you should not worry about the overlap among political, economic, and legal factors. Some students get confused. They're saying, okay, I appreciate, I understand this factor, but then I'm not sure if it's a political factor, if it's an economic factor, if it's a legal factor. You don't have to worry about that in an exam. It's just that you identify the factor, and most importantly, you should be able to develop the factor. Developing the factor means you should be able to explain whether it is an opportunity or a threat, and its reason. That is how, reason or how. How is it an opportunity? How is it a threat? Or why is it an opportunity? Or why is it a threat? So you need to be appreciative of this particular factor. So from an examination perspective, it's just a checklist. It's just an identification that you need to keep in mind. We're taking a short break over here, and we'll resume after 10 minutes.